virtual Burlington High School Counseling Department College Planning Night. Couple things we just want folks to be aware of. This is being recorded by BCAT. We plan to allow parents and students to be able to still view this if they choose to on BCAT. So if you don't want to be publicized on TV this week, you might want to close out the camera, but otherwise you're more than welcome to stay on. We did want to just make everyone aware of that. The way we're going to structure tonight is each of the counselors are going to discuss some obviously things in regard to the college search and selection process. We're each going to take turns. Bear with us. We're going to, when we transition from one counselor to the next, it's going to be a little bit of a transition period. So if you could bear with us through that, we would greatly appreciate it. Couple of things to keep in mind, and it's great to see seniors on this as well, but please keep in mind that the information we're providing tonight is information that really the process began last spring. Even with the COVID and hybrid learning, counselors were still meeting with students, whether it was live or virtual.
Oh, that's not fun.
And you know, we're cramming a lot of information into 2 hours, but please know that this information has been spread out since last spring. So keep that in mind as we navigate through this. If you bear with me, I'm just gonna share my screen.
Also, if everyone could put their microphones on mute, that would be great. We hope you're having fun at home, but I don't know that you want us to hear your dinner conversation.
Okay, so again, senior college planning night. This is the second year we've done it virtually. We always want to remind parents and students of the counseling staff. These are the counseling staff members. You know, we'll share this slideshow with parents after, but we want you to be able to, you know, access the counseling department, whether it's coming down, making an appointment, or emailing your counselor. We just want you to be aware. So this is the counseling department. The other thing to keep in mind too is seniors have a study, which is essentially a free period. They have it out of our 7-day cycle. They have a study 5 out of the 7 days. And that study hall is strategically put there so we can work on post-secondary planning. And we really like to utilize that time to connect with seniors. As I said, we've already begun the process of meeting with seniors. Most of the counselors have already met with a vast majority of their seniors already. The other new option this year for parents to be aware of, and seniors hopefully are aware of this, but every Tuesday during our flex block, we have a flex block on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but every Tuesday flex block, it's a 30-minute window of time. And the counseling department, we're making a counselor available during the flex block for drop-in questions from seniors. We recognize lots of questions come up through this process, and sometimes it's hard to connect. We know seniors are very busy, limited with time. So that flex block, we know seniors are free during that time frame. And that's the time when we really like to try to provide seniors if they do have any questions. Right now, we're going to transition over to Mrs. Smith. She's going to pick up the next section of the slideshow. And as a reminder, if you have questions as we're going through this, please put them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them as quickly as possible.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mrs. Smith, and let me present now. While I'm opening up the slideshow, I also wanted to comment that all of the counselors have, and all of your students have a classroom account. So there is a lot of, if you're not sure what your child should be doing, there's a lot of resources available through your child's classroom account, their counseling classroom account. Okay, so what should seniors be doing now? First, we started this back in the spring, everyone's at a different point, but they should be getting to a point where they're finalizing their list of schools, narrowing their list if they need a couple other schools to consider, or less to consider, or expanding their list if they've narrowed it too much and they need um, some sort of other school to consider as well. They need a balance of reach, realistic, and safety. I'm going to explain that in just a minute. But it needs to be a list that you're comfortable with. Your seniors should also be determining and communicating deadlines. So the way to do that is choose an admission option for your schools: regular decision, early action, early decision. I'll talk more about that in just a minute as well, and the details about that. And they also need to make sure that when they're asking their teachers for recommendations or other people for recommendations, as well as asking us as counselors, they need to be sure that they are letting us know what their deadlines are so that all the materials get sent in a timely way. Fall college visits. How do you get to know colleges better? It's great if you can go on the campus and actually get to see the schools. We know that's not always possible. So most every school we've seen on their website has a virtual tour option. Many schools now also have in-person visits. So I know Columbus Day weekend is going to be a big visit weekend. Plan ahead. A lot of times you have to schedule the interview or the appointment to go on a tour on the website before you go. And it's only limited to certain people at certain times. There's also college rep visits at Burlington. So often the person who is visiting, the person who reads your child's college application often is the same person who is the rep who comes to visit our school. I'll show you real quick, I hope, how to do that. So on your child's Naviance account, if they go up to colleges, under research colleges, college visits will tell you all the lists, the schedule of when people are coming. There's also a number of virtual college fairs. Those are listed on Classroom for your child. The only two in-person college fairs that I'm aware of, one is this Sunday, and I think this would be great if you and your child could visit. It's Worcester State College 11 to 1 is how in-person college fairs work. There's rows and rows of tables, and at one end of the table there's one college, the other end is another college, and they have a list of the majors and they have pictures of their colleges and places to sign up. But that's a great place to go back and forth with often the person who's reading your child's application, to ask questions about what internships are there, and can you tell me more about your business program? Or some people are the first in their family to go to college, and so you don't know what you don't know. So even saying things like, how does the meal plan work in a college, or can you tell me about safety? Those are great to get the face-to-face interaction. Also, Monday, October 25th is at Nashua High School South in New Hampshire, and that's 6 to 7:30. So one thing I also wanted to comment on is demonstrated interest. Colleges track how much interaction your child has with them. So they notice if your child is going to these college fairs and having conversations, or shows up at the Burlington High School visit. And it especially comes into play at more competitive schools when you say that you're interested in a school and you never open their emails. Colleges have ways of tracking that, and so they know when you're not opening the emails. If your child really wants a college, they need to make sure that they are keeping on top of their emails and opening those. So that's demonstrated interest. Okay, going back to reach, realistic, and safety. Realistic is the realistic chance of getting in. Your probability of admissions is even to slightly better than even. A reach is admissions is it's not necessarily a given, and it's going to be harder to get into. Safety, it's very highly probable that you'll get in. Now there's safety and there's also financial safety. Financial safety is one that you and your family, your family knows that it can be a school that your family can afford, or you can make it work. Let me show you how the resources you have on Naviance. So this is the benefit of, I guess, doing these virtual visits. I clicked on UMass Amherst, and when I go to, there's an overview that gives some information. When I go to admissions and I go down here, this is called a scattergram. And green is the people who got in, and red are the ones who were denied. So you can tell about the cutoff is around here. So around a 3.7 is about where the cutoff is. So yes, UMass Amherst is not the acceptance, that that perhaps we had when we were in school. So those are scattergrams. But that's how you can tell where do you fit along that lines. Now notice up here, see where those red X's are way up surrounded by green? Just because you think that the school in general you can get into does not necessarily mean that your program you can get into. So some very bright students might say, oh, I have a 4.0, I should be able to get into the computer science or engineering program at UMass Amherst. Well, this will show you that that's not always the case. I bet you many of these students who were in this area were either nursing, computer science, engineering, or some other very competitive major. Okay, so that's kind of how you get an idea about reach, realistic, or safety. Choosing an admission option. Regular decision is the most common application. The deadlines are January 1st to about March 1st. Often, if you apply regular, often you don't find out until about April, but you don't have to make your decision about whether or not you're going there until May 1st. There's earlier options also, and the benefit of applying early is you find out earlier. Typically, the early deadlines are November, December, and you apply early, and typically you get a decision back end of December into January, early January. So you still don't have to decide until May 1st for early action. Early action, you can apply to typically several schools. But you don't have to make your decision until May 1st. However, there is a restrictive early action. That's where typically you can apply to several restrictive early action. You can only apply to one early action school. You don't have to commit, but you can only apply to one early. The other early option is early decision. So there's early action where you can apply to many. You're just acting early, but you don't have to make a decision till May 1st. Early decision, you have a top choice school, you need to be a strong candidate, but the big thing is you can only apply to one early decision school. You're telling that school, you accept me, I will go to your school. And if you're looking at the most competitive schools, honestly, this is your biggest way to get a leg up if there's any to be had. There are schools where early decision, they're accepting 40 to 50% of the people who they're accepting 40 to 50% of the class that they ultimately take comes from early decision. Because think about it, you're a sure thing. You're telling them, I will go to your school. And sometimes that may, if it's a school that has a 17% acceptance rate, it might make your chances a little bit better. But if you go to that school, if you apply to that school early decision, you're expected to go there. The kids, we have to sign a contract. What we're seeing a new trend at some schools is that there's an early decision one like in November 1st, and then another one like January 1st. Rolling admissions, as you apply, they decide as they go along. Okay, now just to clarify, there's some schools that it doesn't matter where you are in the class, it doesn't matter what your GPA is. There are some schools that are just considered everyone's reach. So here's the list: Amherst, Cornell, Northeastern, Tufts, UNC. You just never know. You could be the very top of your class and we can't guarantee that you're going to get in there. Just about everybody's reach schools are BC, BU. It's very competitive. UMass Amherst, again, is not a safety school. Highly competitive majors, as I mentioned at UMass Amherst, the average could be here, but for this major, it's way up here. Okay. So as you're balancing your list of schools, these are things you need to consider. And as you're choosing reach, realistic, and then safety, you need to be just as happy with your safety because let's be honest, college isn't cheap, and you need to be just as comfortable if that's the best decision for your family if you go there. So there is something, how do you know if it's a financial safety? Well, every college has to have a net price calculator, and the net price calculator will give you a sense for how much money you're going to get from that school. So as you're looking at a school and say, oh, can we make the commitment for early decision? Well, check out that net price calculator, and um, we can now start we're going to talk about financial aid in a little bit, but the FAFSA you can start soon too, so you can see about what your need is, what colleges are going to expect you to pay. So when you check out that, you can also have a conversation with the financial aid department. So that will give you some helpful information. State University UMass admissions. Check the college website for information on test requirements. Almost everybody was test optional last year, and honestly most people are still this year. UMass Amherst, Lowell, and Dartmouth and most state universities are completely test optional this year. Some schools are test optional for general admissions but may have restrictions for certain majors like nursing or their honors program or merit scholarship consideration. I think that Mass Art has a merit, a scholarship thing that they need a test score for. But at any of these state universities, no student can be admitted with a GPA of less than a 2.0. So if your GPA is less than 2.0, or perhaps you're looking for a cheaper option and want to know what's out there, there's a program called Mass Transfer A to B, and it's a partnership between community colleges and state colleges and universities. So there's about 15 mass community colleges in Massachusetts, and say Middlesex, you start off at Middlesex, you earn a GPA of 2.5, and then you want to transfer to wherever you do 2 here at the community at Middlesex, and then you do the other 2 at, say, UMass Amherst. And you work with your counselor at the community college. If you keep that GPA of a 2.5, then you automatically can get into different schools, depending on the space and the major. But you don't have to go through the whole huge transfer process like you would if you were not to be in that partnership. If your GPA is a 3.0, a B or higher, you can also get a tuition credit plus a 10% rebate locked in when you go to that 4-year school to do your last 4-year, to do your last 2 years. Check the requirements for Mass Art, Mass Maritime. Sometimes because they're more unique schools, their programs are a little bit unique, but anyway, look into those. But that's a great way to save money, and a great way if you started off rough in high school and your GPA is not where you wanted to be, that's another option. So, and now Mrs. Leary. Hold on, just a second, let me get you out.
Hi.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, great. So I will now share my screen. Okay, so this next portion of the presentation is the ins and outs of submitting applications and how it works with students, what their responsibilities are, and how it works through the counseling office. Student responsibilities, we urge them to carve out time each week to be working on their post-secondary planning. So that involves doing research, working on applications, working on their essay, doing college visits or virtual events. And part of their research is knowing their application requirements and deadlines. So that is tedious, but that is part of their research, to visit individual college websites to determine how they will be applying and what their deadlines are, and to get themselves organized with all of the requirements. Knowing the counseling requirements, so our office's requirements and deadlines as well. Make and keep regular appointments with us. So the vast majority of seniors do have that study hall this first semester. So they do have a lot of opportunities to make appointments with us. Checking their email weekly. So Mrs. Smith touched upon this a little bit, but even after students apply, or even colleges that they're interested in maybe haven't applied yet, it's really important to be opening those emails and reading them. And after the students apply, they may get an email with information about the status of their application. So it is important for them to check that to see if anything might be missing after the fact, might still be missing. And all students applying to college do need to use Naviance. So no matter how they apply, whether it's Common App, Coalition App, Private App, all of their colleges do need to get into Naviance, and there are several tasks that they need to do within Naviance. So the reason we need them to use Naviance is, number one, we send their transcripts, their letters of recommendation, and any teacher or school forms that might be required specifically by the Common App. Naviance is also useful for the scattergram feature. So looking at the graphs with the BHS data for alumni, and can really help determine if a school is a realistic, or a safety school. It is also necessary to use Naviance to sign up for the college visits. We have college reps coming here. Last year, it was all virtual, but they're back in person this year. We've sent the seniors and even juniors as well information about how to sign up and attend those visits. And they do have to register ahead of time in Naviance to attend. It's also helpful for tracking application deadlines, and they can access scholarship applications through Naviance as well. There will be more information forthcoming about that. So when we talk about specifically who is responsible for sending what, BHS sends the transcript, a school profile, which I will describe a little bit further in a few slides, letters of recommendation, and occasionally supplemental materials that cannot be sent electronically. So that might be an example, might be an outside letter of recommendation from someone not at BHS. We might keep a copy of that on file for the student and submit it to colleges on their behalf, sometimes through regular mail, sometimes through email. The student is responsible for submitting their online applications. So whether it's Common App, Coalition App, or a private application, they're the ones responsible for clicking submit on that application before the deadline. And they do have until the deadline. We don't recommend waiting until the last minute, of course, but they do have until the deadline to submit that application, as well as any supplements that might be required for their colleges, and then to pay any application fees that would be required as well. They are also responsible for submitting their essay, which, if they're using the Common App, that is a section of the Common Application. So really they're just copying and pasting their essay into the writing portion of the application, and it gets submitted when they hit submit on that online app. They're also responsible for sending their SAT or ACT scores, and these will get sent through the testing agency in order to be considered official. So they can self-report their scores on their applications if they wish to, but if the college needs an official score report, that is on the student to log into their testing account, whether it's through the College Board or ACT student, to submit those scores. Financial aid forms are also the responsibility of students and their parents. And then any other supplemental materials that may be sent electronically, a good example of that would be an art portfolio for art majors. Reminders when preparing to apply. The students must complete the FERPA waiver on the Common Application and link their Common App account to Naviance. I can quickly show you this through my practice accounts, but it is also something that the counselors can walk the student through if they're unsure how to do it. So I do have a practice account for the Common App, and a student, if they click on colleges and select any one of their colleges, they will see recommenders in FERPA. And here is where they will sign that waiver. I have to go up a little bit here. There we go. So they can complete the release authorization here. They can learn more about it if they're unsure about it. Basically, you're either waiving or not waiving your right to access letters of recommendation after enrolling at the college. And the students only complete this one time. It does not have to be completed once for every college. It's done once, you cannot change it. And then once it is done, the student is able to log into their Naviance account. Here is my fake account, and click on colleges I'm applying to. And this big pink bar is telling me that I haven't matched my account yet. So you would click on match accounts, and the student is prompted to confirm their Common App account. And that essentially links the Common App to Naviance, so all the materials can be sent electronically. So students do need to complete the FERPA before they can match their account in Naviance, and that allows us to send their transcripts and letters of recommendation to the school. Students are also, so on top of the tasks they need to complete in Naviance, they do need to request a transcript with their school counselor at least 10 school days before the application deadline. So we each have colored slips. Mine happen to be pink slips. And the students have to set up a meeting with us at least 10 school days before the deadline to complete a pink slip with us, or whatever color the counselor has. And this is where they are giving us permission to send their transcript. They're listing the college name, they're confirming the deadline, and they're indicating which letters we need to send to which schools. So that is really the final piece of the puzzle that ensures that we send their materials. And students do not have to have their application done by that deadline. We just need those 10 school days to prepare our materials to submit on the student's behalf. They, like I said, still have until the deadline to complete their parts of the application. And then when students send their application via the Common App or the college website, they'll pay their application fee or indicate a fee waiver if they're eligible. And you can print a copy of your application in receipt if you want to. So the transcript is the student's permanent academic record and consists of just final grades for grades 9, 10, and 11. 12 is a little bit different. It does include the student's GPA through 11th grade, and it is required by all colleges and universities. So this is a somewhat blurry example of a transcript, but you can see 4 boxes, one for each grade level. And I believe the next slide sort of break it down. Yep, the top of the transcript shows the most important thing here, other than the student's personal information, is the weighted GPA that's been calculated through the end of junior year. And then the middle of the transcript is the 4 blocks. So grade 9, 10, 11, 12, you'll notice it gives the level of the courses that were taken, the names of the courses, the level, the final grade only, and the credits earned. And then grade 12 is going to be different. If we were to print a transcript right now, there would only be senior year courses and levels listed. We don't have any grades yet. And then typically right around November 14th, 15th is when first quarter grades get added to the transcript. So any students applying early, colleges will be made aware, they will see their first quarter grades. And then after second quarter closes, those grades get replaced with mid-year grades. And that is typically around the first week of February. So any students applying regular decision, their colleges would get a mid-year update with a mid-year transcript. So the colleges will see any, how they're progressing. They'll see mid-year grades. The bottom of the transcript just provides a key for all of the abbreviations. There are 2 different types of transcript request forms that we use in the counseling office. Number 1 is our colored slips, which I mentioned earlier, which students fill out with their counselors, and those are for college applications only. We have another general white form on the counter in the counseling office that is used for things other than college application. So for example, if a student wanted to share it with a coach at a college because maybe they're being recruited, or if they were going on an interview, or if they needed it to fill out an outside scholarship application, they can come to our office, fill out this general white form, put it back in the box, and within 24 to 48 hours, our registrar will have a transcript for them ready to come back and pick up. So I mentioned earlier the BHS school profile. This is automatically sent with transcripts when we send them to colleges. It is a document that high schools all across the country develop, and basically it gives all of the a lot of information about our school, including contact information. Of course, with the last year and a half, there is a statement about the impact of COVID on our school and our grading and things like that. There's a brief description of school and community. There's things like how many AP courses we offer, the mean SAT scores, how many students in the school, how many students, how GPA is calculated, because of course that can vary from high school to high school as well. That's probably the most important piece. And college admissions use this document to be able to fairly compare students from different towns and from different states, and even from all across the world. And now, Mr. Adubato.
Thank you, Mrs. Leary. Before I jump in, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions. When grades are replaced with the mid-year grades for regular decision, do colleges see first quarter grades, or is it completely replaced with mid-year? So the grade, if a student is applying before the end of the first semester, colleges will see first quarter grades. If they're applying at the end of the first semester, which is late January, early February, then they'll get a semester grade. So it all depends on timing, but the way the transcript works is at the end of the first semester, we'll recalculate the GPA using first semester senior year grades, and that semester grade will be included on the transcript. Does the GPA in the transcript include senior year grade? So that's a good question. Again, right now, the current transcript reads final grades final grades only from grades 9, 10, and 11. And then the senior year grades will be included on the transcript. Again, depending on timing, Burlington High won't recalculate the GPA until at the end of the first semester. However, colleges will see the grades, and oftentimes they'll use the first quarter grades when they recalculate. So I'm just going to jump right in. And again, feel free to continue to ask questions. And if we miss any questions, we'll make sure we go back to them at the conclusion of the presentation.
Joe, can you hang on just a second? There was a question earlier that was answered in the chat box, but I just wanted to repeat it for people who aren't following through the chat. There was a question about, does the restrictive early action mean you can only apply to one school? And yes, you can only, it's like early decision, you can only apply to one school, but you don't have to commit to it. But read the instructions carefully, like Miss Minty mentioned. Read the individual college website carefully, because sometimes you can apply early action to other public colleges, even if they're public colleges in other states. So just read that carefully. Okay, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, no problem. So continuing on with requirements that are sent out with the college application. That the first is the teacher recommendations. And teacher recommendations, we do have a process and procedure we follow at the high school. And please keep in mind, all things being equal, if two students have an equal GPA, two students' transcripts look equal, a lot of times these other application criteria can really make a difference. Colleges have different requirements for teacher recommendations, which is why we would ask you to always refer to Naviance spells it out, but we always encourage and let students know you always need to check the college website as well. Most colleges require 2 letters and a counselor letter. And oftentimes, the two letters would be teachers that the student had later in their high school career, junior year ideally, but certainly if a student has a teacher in senior year that they may have had previously, that can always be a good letter as well. In years past, we really try not to push students. Some students will go arts, humanities for one letter, math, science for another. You can certainly do that, but it doesn't have to be that way. Keep in mind, there are some colleges that may want a teacher, a letter of recommendation from a math teacher. There's a couple of schools out there that would require specifically for a math or science. So again, just pay attention to what the college is asking for. And with the recommendation process, again, we're going over this with seniors now, but you really need to make that request in person. I think that goes a long way, making that request in person. And in addition to that, Naviance does have the capability, and we use it for submitting, as you know, transcripts. We also submit letters of recommendations as well. So there's a slight procedure, slightly not that difficult procedure that seniors need to follow in order to request a letter of recommendation through Naviance. And we ask that more as a follow-up request. The first request should always be in person. Sometimes students will ask us to submit with the application or mail out a recommendation from an outside person, and that's totally fine. You would just want to give us several hard copies of that information. And then thank you notes go a long, long way. I think teachers, especially teachers of juniors that have juniors, really are asked quite a bit to write letters. And so we would just ask students to make sure you say thank you, because the teachers here do a great job of writing letters, devoting time to writing letters, and making students look as best as possible. So I would just encourage you to do that. And this is why we encourage students to get to know their counselors early on, but a lot of colleges will also require a counselor letter. And I think the difference between a teacher and a counselor, for the most part, would be the counselor has seen the student mature and change over the course of 4 years. We've been with them during the course selection process. We've seen some trials and tribulations. And so colleges like to get that overall picture. And that's why we really encourage you to connect with your counselor. We do have some forms that we ask students to fill out. Most counselors will include those on Google Classroom, and it's a simple questionnaire that seniors would complete, and that just helps us write a letter of recommendation. We also have a parent questionnaire as well. So parents, if you want to get involved in this process, you can do that. I believe on this slideshow a little later, we'll have a link, but we can certainly make sure you get a copy of the parent questionnaire. That's your opportunity as a parent to shed some light on some of the things that you've noticed as a parent. And maybe that can certainly help us write a letter. One other thing to keep in mind is we do have a hard copy form that we have here in the counseling office, and actually it's online. And this is a form that students can submit to teachers. And this form allows the teacher to write a much more holistic letter. And there's some questions on there that students will complete. Again, just maybe providing the teacher with additional insight into the student's background that the teacher may not already be aware of. Another part of the senior year college process is your activity list. Now, with Common App, students can list their activities through Common App, and that's fine, and we ask all our students to do that. But we do ask seniors to complete an additional task, and that would be an activity list. The activity list is a very, very basic document that lists senior activities. And we just feel that providing in this format grades 9 through 12, what seniors have completed, really, again, helps us as a counselor to see what students have been involved in. And then fast forward to later this year, it may seem a long time away, but January, February is going to be here before you know it. And we're going to have several local scholarships and donors that really like to review the activity list. So getting that activity list ready to go is very important. And many students have already submitted to their counselor, but we would encourage you to do that. And in the Google Classroom, we do have some do's and don'ts. Like I said, this is a very simple format. It's not as extensive as a resume. It really is just listing activities. College essay. Again, all things being equal, college admissions folks tell us when they have to go beyond the grades and the transcripts, they go into the essay. Essay is a very, very important part of the college process. Believe it or not every college requires an essay. Most do, but it is very important that students are aware of the essay, are working on the essay. The Common App prompts, the Common Application, the prompts were shared back in the spring. And in fact, I can tell you students are working on this in English class now, seniors, and I believe the senior English teachers are using the prompts from the Common App. So it's definitely good to know what the prompts are. I often tell students, it's great to read the prompts, but start with thinking of something individual about you as a student. What is different about you? What's something that you've maybe had difficulty with and endured through it? Some life circumstance, something individual to you, and go from there. Because I think whatever that is, whatever that topic about you is, there's an essay question that will match to it. We did encourage students to work on the essay over the summer. We also had a college application boot camp the very beginning of the school year, end of the summer in August. Miss Nedishin, one of our English teachers, worked with about 10 or 15 students to start working on that essay. But again, your current English teachers are working on this in class. The other thing to keep in mind is, although students have to write an essay, there's also something called a supplemental question. These would be like an extra essay question, maybe not as long as the Common App question. But again, I think sometimes students, it will take them a little bit off guard that there's more than just one. So depending on the college, some colleges may ask a supplemental question. And word count is big. With Common App, I will give you a warning. If you write your essay in Google and paste it into Common App, they have a very strict word limit. And if you exceed the word limit, whatever you paste in, you could potentially be losing part of your essay. That happened to a student a few years ago. Luckily, we caught it. They pasted their essay in, and they thought it was the entire essay, and this whole last paragraph was cut out. So be aware of word count. Also, you can see it here, but proofread. Have your English teacher read it. We read essays all the time in the counseling office. We love to read our students' essays, and we'd be more than happy to take a look. SATs, ACTs, we all know that COVID has made a huge impact in the standardized testing world. Lots of colleges and universities are test optional. We do have a link here, and if you give me a second, I'm going to jump over to it. NACAC is the National Association for College Admissions Counseling. They are most up to date on this information. There are lots of colleges right here in Massachusetts that do not require standardized test scores. So just want you to be aware of that. We encourage students to check the individual websites of the colleges you're applying to, just to make sure whether or not the SAT is or is not required. Again, we use Naviance for a lot of information, but we always like to remind parents and students that going directly to the college website can give you the most accurate and up-to-date information. And if you are going to send scores, and a school requires it, we really encourage students to send the scores. Again, if it's not required and you realize you have a discussion with your counselor, you think your scores are above average, then certainly talk to your counselor, and we could still submit those scores. Again, if it's test optional, they're probably not going to always review those test scores. So again, have a conversation with your counselor. The good news is with standardized testing, ACT, SAT, nothing has to be submitted until the test scores come in. So you can actually have an opportunity to look at your test scores when they come in before deciding on whether or not to submit them. And if students take the SAT, if they did happen to take it multiple times, colleges will do something called super scoring. And what that means is they'll take the highest English and the highest math score from different tests. In fact, some of the colleges we've spoken to over the years have told us they have a software program that once the scores get pulled in, it automatically shows the admissions reps the two highest scores. So again, they do super score quite a bit. If testing is required, we ask students to have it finished up by January of senior year. Burlington High School is a test site for October, November, and December. And last year, this happened much, much more. And 2 years ago, it happened even more, but cancellations were happening all over the place for SATs. Right here at Burlington High School, we had to cancel right at the beginning of COVID. That whole spring, SATs weren't offered. If you do decide to send scores, this is not done through the counseling office. It's done by the student through the College Board website. Okay? You need to make sure you're taking care of that. There is a charge if you wait. So right after you take the SATs, I think there's a window of time where you can send them for free. However, if you wait for scores, then you would need to send scores to colleges that require them. You have to pay per school. Okay? So there is a charge there, and the costs are spelled out here, $12 for SAT, $13 for ACT. Communicating with admissions. One big piece to all this is students, you need to be the one to communicate. It will not look good if a parent calls a college on your behalf. I think college admissions folks notice that. We have had students call colleges right here from our offices at different times throughout the year. But again, students need to really take the lead on this. And believe it or not, we hear this a lot from college reps. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call. It sounds intimidating, but it's really not. Most admissions folks are down to earth folks. They're willing to answer any questions you have. And I think it's definitely good to take advantage of that. Emails, again, they're looking at emails that are coming in with questions, even the email that you use. Please make sure that everything is worded appropriately. And we are more than willing to help. If not as many colleges are interviewing these days, but if a student does go on any kind of an interview, the counselors are all very experienced helping students prepare for those things. And we'd be more than happy to walk students through that process. Okay, next, we're going to hand it over to Miss Minty once I close out. All you, Miss Minty.
All right, thank you. So here I go getting my screen up. I just want to add in terms of interviews, the admissions director from Holy Cross came to visit today, and he was sharing that interviews are, he said it's the easiest way that you can increase your chances of getting in. And he described it as they're surprisingly, how did he put it? I forget the exact word, but surprisingly not as hard as you think they're going to be, with a surprisingly friendly person, and the easiest way to increase your odds of getting in. So I would strongly encourage, for any colleges that offer interviews, it's always a good idea to do them. I have the miscellaneous category, so it says other considerations. So I'm going to cover a variety of smaller topics here. The first one is the NCAA athletic ability. So this specifically applies to someone who may be playing a Division I or II sport in college. It does not apply to Division III or club sports or intramural sports. However, if you are potentially competitive for playing a Division I or II sport, this is a required process so that you'll be eligible in order to play that Division I or II sport in college. So the first most important step is that they do need to go to that website in yellow and create a profile. And then in order to earn their eligibility, mainly it's just a combination of having the required courses in high school, which most of our courses do meet that criteria, and also needing to earn at least a 2.3 GPA in the core courses. And they do provide a calculation sheet too, as far as figuring out what your GPA would be according to their standards. And then traditionally, they have also used a sliding scale where if your GPA is lower, you need a higher SAT or ACT score. And if it's lower, you don't need quite as high a score. At this time, there's many places where it's, because it's test optional, you may not need to submit a score at all at this time, but at the bottom of this slide, there is a link to more specifically about those details as a result of COVID. So first step is complete the profile. Once you complete the profile, you would also need to request that a junior year transcript be sent to the colleges of interest, or actually, I'm sorry, to the NCAA itself, so they clear you. So instead of seeing our registrar in person and filling out that white form for this transcript, instead it's an electronic request on the website, and then she will receive that request and send it to the NCAA. If you have taken the SAT or ACT and wanted to send it, you would just use this code 9999 on the College Board or ACT websites to send your scores to the NCAA. Next category is for students with disabilities. So these could be learning, health, or mental health disabilities. Colleges, just like high schools, do provide reasonable accommodations on a case-by-case basis. But it is important to realize they're not on the bright side. You actually don't need to have had any specific accommodation plan in high school in order to qualify for college accommodation. So sometimes people had no problem in high school, but maybe in college, as a result of the different environment, may need accommodations. And as long as you can provide documentation of your disability, you can consult with that college about what accommodations they have available. On the flip side, it's also important to recognize that if you have had an IEP or accommodation plan in high school, the college is not automatically going to offer you the same accommodations that you had here. So it is important to, as part of your admissions process, if you know that accommodations are going to be important for you, to make sure that you're communicating with those individual colleges about what accommodations could be provided at each individual place. This is less applicable this year because, as multiple counselors have already shared, none of our state universities are requiring test scores this year. However, in general, even before test optional times, students with documentation of a disability were exempt from the SAT or ACT requirement at our public Massachusetts state universities. And they should absolutely feel free to consult with their counselors too, but we're also going to encourage them and you to communicate with the individual college disability and admission offices for the most specific information. Next topic is gap year. So you might wonder why we're mentioning this in the midst of a presentation about college, but a gap year does not necessarily mean that you're not intending to go to college. It just means that you might be choosing to intentionally take a little time off before you start college. So for example, you could volunteer. There's some language immersion programs where you would go to another country and learn speaking another language. Work programs, semesters sounds pretty great to me. There's programs where you're out sailing in the Caribbean, but you're also taking classes while you're on the boat and going into different ports. So in many of these programs, you can even earn some college credits while you're at it. But a common reason to consider doing them might be if someone's just feeling so burnt out from their high school experience that they might not be likely to be successful if they started college right away next year. Often people come back from a gap year feeling more energized and more ambitious, knowing what they want to do. We do have a link on our website to quite a few programs and organizations if you're interested in looking into opportunities, but we would still strongly recommend that if you're considering a gap year program, that you still go through the process of applying to college right now. And then what you would do is just request to put off your start time for a year after you're accepted. especially if you're doing something like a semester, or maybe you're going to be volunteering somewhere where there's not a lot of internet connection. The last thing you're going to want to worry about when you're out abroad or out at sea next year would be trying to do the college application process all by yourself. So we would encourage still applying, but then requesting to take time off. All right, this isn't such a small topic. I think this is a bigger topic, is financial aid. And on the next slide, I'm going to describe a little bit more, for example, what the FAFSA is. But we just wanted to point out, you know, in past years, we've had live financial aid presentations that are put on by this organization called MIFA. This year, just like last year, they're doing all virtual presentations. But the great news is there's so many more opportunities to view them now. So it's not just one day that you have to come, but you go onto their site, and they actually have one coming up just in a couple weeks on Wednesday, October 13th. That's a detailed look at the FAFSA form, which is the main financial aid form, and questions and answers about that. Just to flip over for a moment to the website, MIFA events, this is a list of all the upcoming webinars that they have going on, and most of them are on weekday evenings. The next one they have that's happening next week is about the process for undocumented students. They have a bunch that are just generally about college financing. And I noticed they even have some that are being offered specifically in Spanish, and it looks like even one in Chinese here. So please do go to that site and take advantage. They are your best resource for financial aid advice. It's an organization that most of the people that volunteer there are actually people who work in college financial aid offices as well. So referring to the FAFSA, that is the main financial aid application that you would need to submit to every college. It's the government form. It is going to be available actually tomorrow. So don't jump on it and start it tonight, because you would actually have to start over again. But starting tomorrow, you could absolutely begin working on it. And then the other form that may or may not be required, depending on where you're applying, is one called the CSS profile. And that's actually through the College Board as well, but it's most commonly one that would be required at private universities. It also may be due in the fall. It really depends. So every college has their own deadlines for these forms. So often people will say, what is the FAFSA deadline? And there isn't one FAFSA deadline. Each college is going to have their own FAFSA deadline. So just like you've heard, again, from multiple counselors, it's super important to look at each individual college website to see, first of all, which financial aid forms do they require and what are their deadlines for those forms. Sometimes if you apply early, they might also require the financial aid forms early. And the reason they do that is for your benefit, so that when you get your decision back earlier, they'll also be able to let you know how much money they're able to offer you. And then occasionally a college may even have their own individual application. So do just check those websites carefully. Scholarships. So financial aid is separate. That's purely based on your mostly the parent income. But scholarships, some of them are also based on financial need and income, but some are based on what we would consider merit, other general things like essay contests or athletic involvement or volunteer experience. So you've probably heard of Adopt a Class throughout, especially if you've been in Burlington for quite a few years. That's just one of many scholarship programs that we have, but it is a program where if students volunteer for at least a couple hours each year in high school at specific Adopt a Class events, they would be guaranteed at least a small scholarship through that program. And the more hours that they volunteer, the higher their scholarship would be. However, there are, I want to say 100 other scholarships. I don't think I'm exaggerating, that are also local. And we are very fortunate in Burlington that I think we have far more local scholarships than most any other place I can think of. Very generous community. And as Mr. Adebato, I think, mentioned, most of these local scholarship applications will really be starting to become available in the winter time. Most of them are in February or March. So we will also do a presentation for the students, the seniors, to explain more about that process in the winter. And I usually would advise for right now, focus mostly on the actual college applications. And once you have those settled, you can shift into the scholarship mode. But if you've got the applications wrapped up, or maybe you're a parent who's, looking for something constructive to do here as well, you could feel free to also research some scholarship opportunities for your son or daughter. So if you're interested, and you can look, on any websites you want, but we also have quite a few that are specifically posted on Naviance. So Naviance keeps coming up here too. You're probably noticing that theme. This is what the home screen looks like. And the scholarship information is under the colleges tab. There's a section that says scholarships and money, and then it's scholarship list. Ugh, sorry, I apologize. Apparently I do just have to log back into Naviance for a moment to show this to you. I thought I had it ready. Here comes, I want to show you from a student or parent viewpoint as opposed to a counselor viewpoint. So again, it's colleges, and then scholarships and money, scholarship list. The tricky, kind of annoying thing here is it starts off on the wrong tab. So you don't want to be looking at college specific ones. You want to look at local and regional. So click on local and regional, and then you will find a list here of ones that might actually be available even right now. So the first one listed here is the Coca-Cola scholarship with a deadline of October 31st. It's a lot of money. It's also very competitive because it's a national scholarship. But as an example, for any scholarship on this list, the way to find out the eligibility requirements and how to apply is to click on the link and then scroll to the description in the middle. So this one describes that they give out 150 awards. And that you click on the above website to access the application. They tell you it's online and by 5 o'clock. So some of them, it is important to read the description throughout the year. Some will be ones where maybe you just do the application online, whereas others, it will actually instruct you to turn the application in directly to the counseling department. So it's important to read those details. Again, they'll mostly be, the ones that are local will be posted later on in the winter. Okay, I said you can use any website, but what I do want to say is we definitely don't recommend using private scholarship services where they charge you money to say, pay us $500 and we'll guarantee you thousands of dollars in scholarships. They're not going to be doing anything different than what you could do for yourself for free. We also really don't recommend Googling FAFSA because there are a lot of very official looking scam sites out there. So I would recommend instead going through the link on Naviance, or each college website will also have a direct link to the FAFSA on their financial aid page. Okay, and I forgot, now I believe I'm going to turn it over to I'm going to do this one more slide and then sorry, I apologize. We shuffled a couple slides around just before starting tonight. Got a few more to do, and then Mr. Adebato is going to finish up. So this is important for our male students in particular, is to be aware that financial aid does require that they also register for the selective service. So in order to be considered, they must register when they're 18. They can do it conveniently right on the FAFSA application, or they can stop by the post office. If anyone has questions, feeling uncomfortable about registering, Ms. Diozzi has a lot of information about conscientious objector status. Okay, and then this is a whole lot on one slide, I apologize, but just to put some things in mind for you that after you apply, these are important things to realize. Initially, the colleges will get your first quarter grades on your transcript, but like Mr. Adebato said, we'll send an updated version after the first semester closes with mid-year grades. And then we'll also send the final transcript at the very end of the year, just to the one college that the student chose to attend. The mid-year and final transcripts are sent automatically, so they don't have to fill out additional requests for those. It is really important to track the status of the application after it's been submitted to make sure that everything has been received. And like I said, too, the time to start thinking about scholarship applications would primarily be after you've submitted your applications to college. If you are deferred or waitlisted to a college, please feel free to make an appointment and we can do our best to advise you. What deferred means is if you apply early action or early decision, if the college defers you, that means they are just choosing to not make a decision at this time. Instead, they push your application over into their regular decision pool and they will reconsider your application again at that time. So they don't accept you, they don't deny you. Those things could happen as well, but deferred would mean basically you're just waiting till a little later to get the answer. Waitlisted would happen more in the spring or winter time. After, when they look at the regular decision applications, waitlisted is not accepted. It's also not completely denied, but honestly, most of the time, students on a wait list, it's rare to be admitted. It's only if the college doesn't have enough of students who they originally accepted choose to come. Like someone else shared, I think Mrs. Smith too, you do have to just decide where you're gonna go and put in your deposit by May 1st. And you cannot put in a deposit at more than one school. We also can't send a final transcript to more than one school. So by May 1st, it will be important to make that decision about where you're going. And in terms of senioritis, you've probably heard this term, but what this means is many seniors, it's tempting, especially after you've applied and especially after you've been accepted to colleges, to think, okay, now I can just forget about my classes. I've been accepted to college and I'm kind of worn out. But it is really important to keep your grades up to a similar standard of what they were when you were admitted. Again, because they will receive that mid-year update and the final update. It's not a situation where you have to stress out and say, oh no, I have a B+ now and I had an A- before. But if you had an A- and then all of a sudden you've got a D+, that could be grounds for the college removing their original offer of admission. And behavior is also really important. You may have seen headlines sometimes when people make the news for bullying or other type of really difficult behavior. That could also be grounds for a college taking back an admission offer. Okay, so especially for parents, what can you do to help? There are a lot of the pieces where we have stressed it's really important that the seniors be the one to take the lead, but here are some things that you can do to take the lead. So first of all, if there are any important restrictions, it's important to share those with your son or daughter. So for example, if they've got their heart set on going to college in Hawaii, but you're saying, no way, we will not be able to afford those plane tickets, it's important that they know that before putting all their hope into that unrealistic dream. On the flip side though, don't necessarily look at the sticker price or what the total cost of the college appears to be, because as I think Ms. Smith was sharing, sometimes the more expensive colleges, depending on your financial aid, could end up being your cheaper options. Actually, Mr. Adebato and I earlier today had a session with a man from an organization that had a great way of comparing based on income and based on merit scholarships and GPA, what would the actual price be at certain private versus public colleges. And sometimes it's surprising, the most expensive private ones can sometimes be cheaper than the public. So last year, for example, I had an excellent student. He was a mostly A student from a fairly middle income family. And he was offered a package at Boston University where it only cost him $4,000 a year to go there, which is even less than Middlesex and significantly less than the UMass's, which are closer to 20 or 30,000. So it's important to do your financial aid homework before you just cross places off your list. Do remind the deadlines are really important, and it's maybe a transition for some students because teachers have been lenient, or other situations, deadlines have been flexible. College deadlines are not at all flexible, so it's critical not to miss them or to miss those financial aid deadlines. But don't nag. I don't know if I love this language so much, but you know, the seniors, they get very overwhelmed by having people constantly asking them about it. So instead, it's actually, we found it's effective if you want to try to set a particular time during the week, just once a week, that you both agree that you'll check in about the college status, as opposed to, you know, trying to ask them every day about it. And like Mr. Adebato said, though, they should be the one that if there's a question for a college, that they call or email that college. You will absolutely need to help with the financial aid paperwork. That's the piece where they're not going to know about your income and all that tax information, that you're going to need to fill that out. And most importantly, be their cheerleader. Like I said, it is a stressful time. And I think many students, unfortunately, maybe their greatest fear is, what if I just don't get into any of my colleges? I would reassure you that I actually have never had that happen, especially as long as the student is working with their counselor and making sure that they have at least a couple truly safe colleges. It's not going to happen, but it's very reassuring if they know that as their parent, that you tell them, okay, so if you didn't get in, I'm still going to love you and we're going to figure out a plan. Speaking of stress, some of this might be a little repetitive, but it is helpful to be proactive and stay organized. Like Ms. Leary said, set aside at least a little time each week so you're not doing it all at once. Remind yourself there is a college for everyone. So I think people get stressed out when they're focusing just on, out of the hundreds of excellent schools we have in this country, they're just focusing on those few where the admission rate is, you know, less than 30%. The majority of colleges, it's much higher than that, and extremely likely that you'll get in and still come out with an excellent experience. Also, don't feel overwhelmed and pressured that you have to apply early because it feels like everyone is. We still, even though it's increased every year in terms of how many people apply early, still more people apply regular than early. So if you don't have this all figured out yet, and it's really, you know, cutting into your sleep and just stressing you out, take a breath and maybe say early, maybe it doesn't make sense, and I'll just do the regular deadlines and give myself a little more breathing room. Students can help parents not be stressed also by share what's going on with them. Don't leave them in the dark, because that's a very stressful place to be in too. And parents and families, you know your family members best and can probably tell when they don't seem like themselves. So do keep an eye out for that if it seems like they're getting to an unhealthy level of stress around this process. And if so, just ask for help when and if you need help. Just one more, this is a visual about kind of healthy stress versus unhealthy stress. So it's a principle called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And the idea is that on this end, we have performance, how well you're going to do. And along this line, we have arousal, or I would substitute the word stress here. So if there's no stress at all, actually, you're not going to perform well. This is a person sleeping. Someone's going to be sleeping, or they're going to be bored. That's actually not good to have no stress at all. The best performance is right in the middle. But then when it goes over that hump, unfortunately, performance declines and it can be really dangerous. So right over this side would be at the level where we're starting to feel stress. We're not performing as well as we would if we weren't stressed. And even beyond that, this area I would describe as anxiety. That's going to be severely limiting your ability to perform normally. And at the far end, it could be, you know, really the panic level and not being able to do much at all. So when you start to feel like you're heading into that stress anxiety point, it's important to step back, breathe, you know, seek help and reach ways to restore yourself to that more calm but alert state. And now I'm truly going to pass it back over to Mr. Adebato.
Thank you, Ms. Minty. So as we all know, the MCAS, and maybe you received an email from us today, MCAS is still a test being offered. However, it's no longer required for the class of 2022. Students do have the option to take the test to try to qualify for one of the two MCAS awards. One is called the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, and the other is called the Stanley Koplik. Keep in mind, the class of 2022 did also have the option to take the MCAS last spring. And so scores just came in. We got them today. We're in the process of going through them, making sure that the information we have is correct. And we plan on getting word out to students if they qualified for the Koplik or the Adams. So for the Adams Scholarship, what they plan to do as of now is to just take the top 25% of the scores of those students that participated in the MCAS. And if a student hits that threshold within the top 25%, then they'll receive a tuition waiver. So a tuition waiver, the amount varies from college to college. Again, it only applies to the public colleges and universities. And you'll receive a letter in the mail that indicates you are an Adams Award recipient. And if a student does attend one of the Mass public colleges and universities, they simply take that letter and provide it to the financial aid office, and they will waive the tuition cost. Tuition does vary. It's from school to school. We always use UMass as an example, UMass Amherst. It's around $1,800 or so tuition each year, and that tuition would be waived. Room, board, and fees are probably $28,000. So unfortunately, the higher amount is not waived, but I think at this stage, anything helps. So that some students will transfer to a public school. Maybe they were an Adams Award recipient, and then they decide to transfer. Well, students can still use that award. And so this is why we ask parents, please keep a copy of that letter. Again, the letters aren't going out probably until next week, but we did want you to be aware. Eligibility is based on the first attempt. So if seniors that took the MCAS in the spring did not qualify for the Adams, if they'd like to test again, they can, but it will not count for the Adams. The Adams is based on the first time you took the MCAS. Koplik is a different process with the same end result, that being a tuition waiver. You qualify based on your math, English, and science score, scoring a high enough score. In addition to that, that's the initial qualifier. And then in addition to that, and I just want to make sure, the Koplik is subject to change. They made some modifications last year. So in years past, it's been, you need to score advanced on one of the three MCAS and at least proficient on the other two. And then beyond that, you would need to take an SAT subject test or an AP test. Or you could take two subject tests or two APs. Well, SAT subjects aren't offered anymore, and students may or may not have taken them. So the state will be coming out with alternatives to these requirements. For example, for last year's seniors, they allowed students to show, I think it was a B or better in specific courses at the high school, honors or AP courses, or a couple CP courses that showed they were proficient with English, math, or science. So keep your eyes out for Koplik. I spoke with the person that coordinates the Kopliks within the state today, and they are still in the process of finalizing that. So the Koplik requirements listed here are going to be outdated, and we will let you know as soon as we hear back. But some things that would still count, college GPA is a 3.3 or higher. So what that means is if you do receive a Koplik, you need to maintain a certain GPA, and then you need to have completed a FAFSA form, which Miss Minty said will be available beginning tomorrow. Usually there are questions on the Koplik and Adams Awards. Feel free to email or give me a call, and I can answer any questions you have, but please keep your eyes out for that. Naviance registration. So parents, you can get access to Naviance if you don't already have it. Feel free to email Mrs. Kavanaugh. Her email is listed here. She can get you up and running on Naviance. Again, we encourage parents to help, especially with the scholarship process. You can help seniors review and look at applications. And then I mentioned earlier about a senior parent questionnaire. That's a questionnaire that you can complete to help the counseling department or your son or daughter's respective counselor write a letter of recommendation. The more details that we have, the better and more informative we can be when writing a letter.